Good morning, everyone, or afternoon if you're joining us from the East Coast. We will be having a full house today, over 200 people registered for today's webinar. And good news, it's Friday. Today we're going to be talking about repetitive behaviors that so many of our loved ones struggle with and what you can do to address them. This is Susan Hedstrom, by the way. I'm the Executive Director for FPWR. And I'll be moderating today, so hopefully you won't have to hear too much from me. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We will record this session, and we'll share this recording sometime next week so that you can use the slides that Elizabeth is going to share with you. Most importantly, we really do want this to be an interactive webinar today, so please chat in. You can find the little chat message in your GoToWebinar control panel. You can type in your questions and they will come to us, and we will answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. If possible, we will also try to unmute some of you so that you can ask your questions directly to Elizabeth. So I'm very excited. We have Elizabeth Roof joining us from Nashville, Tennessee. How are you doing today, Elizabeth?
I'm good. It's Friday, right?
Exactly. So many of you already know Elizabeth Roof, but for those of you who don't, Elizabeth is a senior research specialist at the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center. She has helped hundreds of people with PWS and their families, my family included, and she's perhaps best known in the PWS community for her behavior advice. So with our worlds turned upside down as they are today, and our kids at home more than usual, I thought we could all use a little bit of help from Elizabeth right now. So Elizabeth, I thought we could talk a bit today about something that I've heard from a lot of parents is a current challenge, and that's repetitive behaviors, specifically repetitive questions. These can be challenging and aggravating behaviors, even for our most patient parents. So what can we do to stop or reduce this behavior?
I think some of it is just to kind of realize that right now people with PWS feel really anxious, right? There's not a schedule, they're not going to school. So for them, the worst thing that could possibly happen is not having a structure. So I think for parents, it's to kind of realize that, you know, for them, it's the worst thing that could happen. No structure, no going to school. A lot of kids with PWS look forward to school, they like it. And so it's hard to imagine not doing it. So I think we just have to kind of realize that for them, their world's turned upside down. So one of the things I suggest is imposing structure. So everybody thinks, oh, downtime, whatever else. People with PWS cannot manage downtime. So we have to really think about visual schedules, the idea that we come up with some ideas of things that we can do to kind of impose that. And I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to actually show some of my slides because I think this will actually help people kind of understand what exactly is going on. Let's see. Okay. So, you know, this idea of kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, you know, repetitive behaviors we know are related to anxiety. People who are anxious are highly intolerant of uncertainty. And if you haven't figured that out with PWS, they don't like when things are not certain. And they may experience a high level of discomfort in ambiguous or unclear situations. Welcome to COVID-19, right? Every day something changes, every hour sometimes. So this can lead to repetitive behaviors, which can lead to temporary relief, but also can increase to get the same feeling. So then it becomes kind of a compulsion. So compulsions like scratching a mosquito bite can relieve the feeling, but then the need to keep doing it kicks in and then it's hard to stop. So I want people to kind of think about for them, once they started, it's hard to stop, but realize that a lot of what drives it is anxiety. So anxiety in PWS can look like worry. It can be a constant need for reassurance. Often it is the need to control situations and or people, including parents. So, and that they may have an initial pushback in new situations, which this is a very new situation, this is kind of unprecedented, and then have lots of questions about schedules and expectations. And so understanding that transitions are really hard. The one thing I want to have people really think about though is not just the repetitive behavior, but there are two different things that kind of go on in PWS. Self-soothing behavior. I have a lot of kids that actually tear paper, flip through books. They like to sort things, cards, pennies, whatever else, versus things like questions, which can be really hard to stop. Self-soothing is a good thing. When we're stressed, it's good to have something that kind of makes us feel better. And you can tell if the behavior that your kid is doing makes them feel more calm, that's a self-soothing behavior. If it makes them feel more anxious, like questions where they keep on, and no matter what you say, it's not enough information, it's not the right answer, then that is an anxiety kind of compulsive behavior. Self-soothing should be built into the day. You should definitely think about making a schedule if you haven't already done so. Your child should help you make that schedule, and then you should follow it, and you got to build in breaks, or it's going to break you. It's going to break your kid. So this idea that we have to think about realistic expectations. I like to think about building in some sense of chance, because again, it kind of helps people tolerate uncertainty. Having a game spinner turn into activities that are all okay activities for your kid to do, but they pick the next thing based on the spinner, and you use timers and other things, really can make it fun. And it also lets them know that you don't control everything, right? Whatever that little ticker hits on is what you guys are going to do next. And then build in movement and deep breathing throughout the day. People talk about exercise, but exercise sounds awful. Doing something you enjoy sounds fun. Dance breaks, movement breaks, stretching breaks, whatever it is, so that your kid is actually doing something throughout the day. Some of the strategies, I tell people this all the time, limiting questions to 3. Do not let your kid ask you over and over and over. Allow them to teach you a skill or subject. Use daily activities to teach new skills. So they can be good at something. Why can't they teach you another, sibling, somebody else, a new activity? And again, use things like planting, flowers, cooking, laundry. Anything that you do can teach skills of measuring, math, reading, those kinds of things, and allow them to be in charge of some activities. They like to actually control others, so we can use that to actually help others. So, is there a neighbor they can help in some way? Is there, something they can do in a kind of remote way to help other people? Cards for hospital workers. What can they do to take some of that energy and turn it into something positive? Talk about what they can control and what they can't, and be really concrete about that, because people with PWS struggle with that. Visual schedules, I'm a huge fan. I think this is one of those times, if you're not using these, you should be. Helps people move forward, give steps in order. It's a concrete reminder of what comes next. So instead of answering the question, point to go, what's coming next? What are we doing next? Well, we're doing this. Okay, great. Don't keep answering it. Gives people a sense of accomplishment. They know when something's done. And again, refer to the schedule. It becomes something else, not you, that's doing the thing and whatever else. So those are some of the things I think that can really help with that repetitive behavior. And there are things that are really kind of concrete. So I think for families, giving yourself the pass that, this is what it is, right? There's going to be days where you get nothing done and they're not learning and you're not doing anything and it's hard to work, but just kind of realizing that right now that's okay. Keeping your kid engaged, part of the process, making them feel like they're important, that they're listened to, but not too much, right? You don't want to get that started that everything they say is very important. But I even told a lady about a talking stick. You have an object that you have to hold. If you want to ask a question or say something, you have to hold that so that you have your chance to talk. Otherwise, as I often tell my kids when they were little, mommy's ears are tired, they need a break. So I can't listen to your questions anymore. So it's okay to take breaks and do those things. So don't worry if you have to use technology or other things to give yourself a break, because everyone needs a break. We're close quarters. It makes people crazy. So I think Susan had some more questions. I was going to talk a little bit about motivation, but I think I'll do that in a minute. But I thought we'd focus really mainly right now on repetitive behaviors. And if people have questions or other things they want to ask at this point, I think this would be a great time to take some of those repetitive questions and behaviors and kind of problems you're having.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to reiterate to everyone who's joining us today that this is really going to be an interactive webinar. This is your opportunity to ask your questions. Perhaps you're looking for some advice on how to handle certain situations. Please submit these questions to us. You can do it first by typing your question into the GoToMeeting control panel. You can also raise your hand. And if you're hooked up to audio, I can unmute you so that you can ask Elizabeth questions directly. We do have a couple of questions. Did the session freeze on just me or others too? Natalie, I think the session is working pretty well, but if we do have audio issues, please, you guys let us know. And yes, the webinar is currently full. We maxed out our webinar rooms, Elizabeth. You are a popular person. we will share the recording with everyone afterwards. And we had discussed having a second webinar next week, Elizabeth. So
Yeah.
for people who haven't had an opportunity to get on to this one, there's going to be more. So please let people know that one, this webinar will be made available, and two, we're going to do a second webinar later so that more people can get an opportunity to ask their questions with Elizabeth.
Yeah. And then I think next time we'll focus more on maybe some of the school things about how do you teach your kid and those kinds of things, and some realistic expectations for people who are trying to become teachers and parents at the same time. Wow, challenges, right? So.
Right. So, you know, we've got a number of questions coming in, and you guys, again, just keep sending these questions in. We'll go through as many as we can. I think we could do maybe 15 minutes of questions now, Elizabeth, so that you can still get to the rest of your presentation.
Yeah,
but I'm just going to start going through these. So let's start with a question from Mandy Young. We do writing skills and make a grocery shopping list once a week? Oh, Mandy, that's a great idea.
Great idea.
Okay, any aids or ideas for skin picking and hair pulling?
I mean, I think keeping their hands busy. So, you know, if you can cover up a spot or do whatever, I mean, I think that's great. Keeping their hands busy. Lots of like manipulable things. So Play-Doh, anything that feels like it gets the same sensation. Have kids who pull apart like upholstery trims or yarn or whatever else. I think you just find something that's a replacement behavior. But if you keep their hands busy and them busy and engaged, you find less of it. So again, if they're watching something, you know, can they hold something? Is there a way that they can cuddle a teddy bear? Is there a way that they can kind of keep their hands busy, even if it is just kind of like, you know, kind of ruffling the stuffed animal's fur, whatever it takes to basically take that kind of negative behavior and turn it into something that's kind of a replacement behavior. Those kinds of things. I know Farmanac is not available anymore, which is a bummer. But again, those are things that you can do. And again, keep them busy, but also just know that when they have downtime, they're going to go to that. So just be aware, try to redirect, cover it up, and don't keep saying don't skin pick, because I mean, come on now, right? It's like going, don't scratch that mosquito bite. They're going to do it. So do this instead. Hey, I need you to help me with this. Redirect.
Very nice. So we're getting a lot of questions specific to self-soothing behavior. So maybe we could spend a little time talking about that. I know my son loves to flip books, you know, flip pages in a book, and it drives me crazy, but it soothes him.
Right.
There are some examples of other people, their loved ones. One daughter likes to take showers repetitively. Is it okay to let her take 7 showers a day?
I would say 7 is too much. So again, could they take one, you know, could you break it down to like 2 or 3 a day? So again, it's something I tell people all the time. The line about self-soothing is, does it disrupt other people? Does it just distress other people? It generally doesn't ever distress them, right? They're great. If everyone could allow them to do it, they'd be awesome. So this idea is that we want to figure out if it is a behavior like the flipping books. I know it keeps them from doing other things, but in this case, there's a little less to do, right? So building in breaks where you have a 10-minute book page flipping. I have kids who cut paper. I have kids who do other things. If it doesn't distract or disrupt other people, then it's okay to let them do it. Not to the exclusion of everything else, but you build it in, right? I like to clean, which is a more adaptive behavior than some of the other things I could do, but it does make my family crazy because when I get stressed, I'm scrubbing, I'm vacuuming, I'm in their space. So again, you have to kind of realize that for the stuff like showers, it's okay to take one, but 7 a day means that water and, you know, power and all that kind of stuff is kind of, you're depleting that. So, you know, maybe make her realize that in doing that, we're taking away from other people. Sometimes that works with them, sometimes not, but I would limit it so that it's not something that is disrupting. Everyone else has no hot water because your kid's taking 7 showers, but everything else, limit it, put a timer on, let them do it for a while, and then bring them back to a task. It should be a preferred activity, so that when they get done with it, there's something else you need them to do. So having a timer is a great way to say beginning, middle, end. Put it up.
So this is a really great question that came in, which is, how do you identify the difference between a self-soothing behavior and a repetitive behavior? Which behaviors are okay to encourage? Which behaviors do you need to put a stop to?
Right. So if you're, and the idea that self-soothing makes you calmer. So when your kid is doing a self-soothing behavior, whatever it might be, and sometimes skin picking is a self-soothing behavior, it makes them feel like you can watch them visibly just like get into something. It's almost like somebody knitting, right? You watch them and they're so intense and whatever else, they're not thinking about anything else. They're not bothering anybody else. And when they're doing it, they seem like they're just completely into it. That is the difference between a self-soothing behavior and a compulsive behavior. But even with self-soothing, there are some that are a little bit more disruptive or more distracting to other people versus not. Some kids like string. I have kids who like to kind of touch rubber gloves. Again, compartmentalize it. Give it a time, a place to do it, but not all day, right? Because it can kind of take over. So again, you want to make sure that if they feel better and it seems to soothe them, let them do it because we're all stressed, right? But at the same time, that you don't want it to take over your entire life. So all day is flipping through pages or taking showers or whatever it is. You want to make sure it has a place and a time, just like recess. Most kids will do recess all day, right? Or lunch, but you have it so that it's a part of the day, not the whole day.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I do have one hand up. I thought I'd give it a try and let's see how the audio works. Lauren, I see your hand is up. I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute so that you can ask your question. You're unmuted.
Am I unmuted? Okay. It's because I couldn't figure out how to type in my question, but then I figured it out. So I'm getting more tech savvy every day.
Me too.
My question was, I'm a big fan of using specific verbiage with our kids, and I wonder if you had some suggestions for how to communicate to them this idea of limiting their questions to 3 or however many repetitive questions you're allowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would do is kind of sit down with them at some point, and it's, and this is a great natural transition, right? Natural transitions are a good time to actually do it and say, with everything being crazy and us all being at home and everybody sharing the same space, mom needs to be able to do, 4 different tasks where I used to just do 1 during a day. So we're gonna make sure that you get your questions answered, but I'm only going to answer them 3 times so that we're not saying it over and over and over. So I need you to listen carefully. I need you to write it down if that works for you, and I need you, at some point to repeat it. But I'm only going to say it 3 times. I'm not going to do it over and over. And of course, initially they're going to go, "What? I hate that idea. It's awful." And you're going to go, "Yeah, I know, right?" So it's going to be a learning experience. So I think it's important to kind of say that at this time, with things being so different, you're going to implement some things that are going to work for them and going to work for you. And so they're not going to be happy initially. And you're going to have to always do the confused face. When they ask me after 4 times, I just go, "I can only answer 3 times." And for most kids, they do that. Asked and answered is something another family does. Refer to the schedule, whatever you need to do. But I'm telling you, if you start answering more than 3 times, you'll be answering 300 times in a week. They just don't ever want to stop. They love to hear the sound of their voice, the sound of your voice saying exactly the same thing. It never gets old to them. It's like a record playing over and over and over. So just realize that sometimes the questions themselves become compulsive when we keep answering it. Sometimes we are the problem, not the solution.
I love that advice, Elizabeth. I've got another parent here with her hand up. Jane, I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute and we can let you ask your question. Jane, are you there?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Wonderful. Hi. It took me so long to get on. I can appreciate the difficulties people are having with the computer. I'm the computer idiot. But anyhow, since we've all been kind of quarantined, I'm calling from the Bronx in New York City. And so we're in a hot spot here.
We're thinking about you.
Oh, thank you. Brandon, since we've been home so much, he has been wanting more food and demanding more food. And we always had it under control. It wasn't a problem before because we got a diagnosis at 3 weeks. So we were kind of out there early with it, and we always had a scheduled snack time. But now that he's home, even though we're doing things,
right,
we're home all day. So it's, okay, let me eat. I'm bored, let me eat, type of thing. And it's gotten to the point where he'll, insist upon it. And we didn't really have that before.
Right.
So it's, this, I think it's basically just because we're home.
Right. The kitchen's right there. I mean, come on. I mean, for
Exactly.
us, I have somebody I work with who said I've already gained weight because it's there all the time. I can't imagine how hard that would be. It'd be like somebody's a recovering alcoholic working in a bar. All of a sudden they're like, well, I don't know why I'm here, but suddenly I am. So I'm thinking about it all the time. I think maybe talking to him, he sounds like he's pretty high functioning, and saying, gosh, when you were doing all the things that we did before, we ate on this schedule, for you to kind of manage your weight, and if you can kind of use that, or and your health at this point, because the one thing, and I don't want people to freak out, but being healthy at this point is just so important. So, maybe focus, if he can handle that, to say, I want you to be as healthy as you could possibly be at this point, and to say that we need to keep on the same schedule with the same amount of food, the same kind of food, the same calories, however you want to do it, that you think you can get him to buy in. And when he says, again, I'm bored and there's food like right there, I think coming up with a list of activities that maybe he picks out. So could he do a preferred activity? Could he go on the iPad for a few minutes? I don't know. But is there something that would engage him and kind of get him, his mind off of it if it's not food? And I will say that if you give in now, it's going to only increase. So I tell people all the time, it's like you want to make sure that you put those limits in place, because once you kind of like creak open that door a little bit, they're going to go, and knock it wide open and go, great, all the rules are gone. So I think it's important to kind of, if he can handle it, to talk about the health aspect, and then come up with other activities that you can do instead of that. Yeah. Or other even snacks that he can have, something that's low calorie or whatever else. But again, I just know that generally once they start, it doesn't end. So it's not like you're going to go, oh, I'm okay with celery. No, I want Cheez-It. So, just come up with something that you can live with, but also know that if they gain some weight, I mean, I think everybody's in that boat right now, that it's harder to manage that when the kitchen is right there all the time.
Yeah, distracting is definitely more challenging. We have to get a little bit more creative, especially when we're stuck indoors. I noticed with Jaden, the first week was fine, the second week was fine. Week 3, he's asking for his snacks or meals repetitively for half an hour before time. So we just had to really stick to the clock and say,
that's what I was going to say. So if you have a schedule, use that schedule and just go, when do we always have snack? And they'll say like 10 o'clock. Right, is it 10 o'clock? No. Okay. So I think using visual cues, an analog clock, or whatever you need to do for them to understand. And I think, Susan, that's a great idea, is to literally say, this is what we've always done. We're going to keep doing that.
Yeah. We've got a lot of questions now that are related to schedules. So Elizabeth, do you think it's a good time to chat a little bit about those?
Yeah, so as far as the visual schedule thing, what I want to talk about is you come up with something that works for you. This is just kind of a little, a mock of one. But I think this idea of coming up with, kids should be getting up at a certain time. They should be expected to take care of self-care, toileting, grooming, all that kind of stuff, and put it into your day, and then think about a school schedule. So this idea that you have kind of daily living activities to some degree, and then this idea of what you do. But I think for a lot of kids, we've had adults with PWS who really enjoy a schedule. Keeping them on one and having it visual, putting stickers or check marks or whatever you want to do, helps them kind of know what the next thing over is. The other thing I will say, kind of related to schedules, is motivation. I know Susan and I had a conversation about, kids with PWS right now aren't very motivated, and why would you be? I mean, it's hard for us to be motivated. I'm not getting nearly as much done as I used to. So this idea, for everybody, it's really difficult. So if we can think about that they need some level of control, where can the control be? Where can they have it? For some kids, the idea that they can compete against each other, they can compete against you. If it's activity, if it's a math problem, if it's word list, whatever it is, can you be part of the kind of thing? Can you be almost like a student sometimes and a teacher and other times? What can you do to keep them going? Timers work, other things, like I said, that kind of friendly competition, whatever you do, but making it fun. I mean, I don't know, everybody has to act like it has to be like the worst thing ever. Make it fun. And you have to say what you mean and mean what you say. So this idea that you have to be accountable. So if you come up with a system, like a visual schedule, whatever else, if you don't follow it, or you don't and they're not following it, and nobody seems to say anything, all I can say is it's not going to work. It has to be something they like, structure, so you have to kind of make the structure as part of the day, but also know that there's some ebb and flow in motivation for us as well, right? It's natural. Don't fight it. Don't beat yourself up. But the next day, even tell your kid, God, mom screwed up. She just didn't keep the schedule today. So I need you to help me keep the schedule. And kids with PWS love telling other people what to do. So let them do that. Let them be your timekeeper. Let them be your PDA, your time, you know, the person who tells you when it's time to move on to the next thing. Let them help you do that. If you let them be part of the control part, they're going to be way more bought into the idea of doing a thing, finishing it, and going to the next thing because they like to be in charge. So use their natural kind of inclination to be part of that solution.
I'm getting a lot of comments, Elizabeth, from people who are really just supporting the use of schedules, that they're really working for their loved ones. A 32-year-old who lives and loves a schedule, and it makes it so much easier to follow that person's demands when that schedule is being used. One parent, you all may know Cindy Zapax, she has a copy of the schedule from school that she's been able to modify for use at home, and that's really helping. And then I've got a lot of questions here. So how about the kiddo who we have the schedule for them, but they just want to rush through it and check things off. So that, you know, that they want to see that schedule completed, but they're not actually fulfilling what needs to be done.
So that's actually a really great question. So, and that's true of anybody, right? So we're like, check, 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 we got it all done. So the idea is in those cases, what you want to do is have some metric to kind of figure out what is considered successful. Just like when your kids clean their room, like if they throw all the crap in the closet and throw the, you know, comforter over the bed and go, done, is that really okay? So if it comes to, you know, a task, a school task, you know, is it done correctly? Is it done well? That kind of stuff. And again, you can't really, you know, quibble about certain things, but did they get the problems right? Because if they just went through them and they're not right, well, that's not the same thing. So coming up with concrete examples in your life that you can kind of help them see that if you do it this way and you don't do it correctly or you don't do it well, it's not really the same thing. So coming up with metrics so that if they, you know, they have to get, you know, 9 out of 10 correct, they have to get this one done a certain way. You come up with the criteria. Again, let them to help you with that. And then when they say, I'm done, well, let's go through our checklist. Is our name on the top? Do we do them correctly? Go through all the steps and then, and don't say they're wrong. Let them, are they all right? And they're like, no, like 9 of them are not right. Well, what do you think we should do? And I always do the confused, like, what do you think we should do? And they're like, I probably should do them again or whatever else, or let's move on to the next task. Well, should we move on if they're not done correctly? And they're like, so try to get them to do it. It may be hard, but I think, like I said, at least your kid is motivated to get through a schedule. So at that point, it's really focusing on the job and coming up with some metric to figure out, is it done well? Is it done right? And if it is, lots of verbal praise. Oh my gosh, look at you. I had no idea you could do this. Heap it on, because that will keep them motivated to do it right, not just get through it.
Right. Just as a reminder for you folks, if you raise your hands, I will take you off mute so that you can ask your questions directly to Elizabeth. You're also welcome to type your questions into the chat box. I'm going through those questions right now. The next question here, Elizabeth, is someone whose daughter gets anxious about the details. So she has a schedule. We're going to do A, then B, then C. But her daughter gets super anxious about all the details in between. So, you know, but in order to do this, I have to get my shoes on. I have to get my coat. All of those little details. How do you manage the minutia of that anxiety?
I think some of it is you build that into the schedule. So, you know, coming up with the things that they have to do so that they can visually see them. So if they need to get on their shoes or grab their coat or whatever else, you make that part of the schedule. It's just like with us, right? If we were going to go drive somewhere, you have to have your keys and you need your purse and you need the stuff you need. So I think for them, they want to make sure if you can do it in advance. So can you have like a go bag or whatever so that it is like done? They pack it the night before when you're not kind of stressed for time or a function, and let them, you know, go over it. They can make their own checklist. Do I have this? Do I have that? Do whatever. And then when they do, just say, you're already prepared. You're really prepared. I'm so proud of you for being prepared. And then don't keep engaging. Like you go, okay, that's great. Move on. And so don't let them kind of get stuck on that. And again, a lot of people get more kind of worked up about the getting a thing together, just like with playing. They get all their toys out, they're lined up, they're whatever, and by the time they get it all out, time's over, they can't even play. So this idea is that preparation and anticipation can sometimes be a problem. So you want to contain it, you want to put it at a time where it makes more sense. And then if you can do it so that you acknowledge that they've done a good job and they're prepared, but don't keep answering the questions about it. We're good, you got it, I'm proud of you, you got it under control. So really focus on their mastery, their control, not necessarily you doing it, right? They're in control, they're doing a good job. Focus on the positives where they're at. And for a lot of kids, parents don't do it, they only point out what's not happening. Right. You're only going to get a lot of negative behavior then.
So schedules and routines can be very helpful in managing anxiety, but we've also heard that if you are too rigid or too scheduled and too routines, it can result in less flexibility, so that when you do need to make changes, you see an increase of negative behaviors. Wow. So what is, how can we change our schedule so that they remain flexible, but still provide that structure to keep the anxiety low?
So I would say that time really shouldn't matter, like when things happen time-wise, besides meals and or snacks, that shouldn't matter. So the order is more important than the time. The other thing is have blocks built in where you have a spinner, a roll of the dice, something where you're like, okay, it's Freaky Friday, what are we gonna do? Roll the dice, what comes next? And they're like, if it's a 6, that they can help you even build these kinds of games into their schedule. And again, it's the risk and the reward of what comes next, and they can't control it, right? And what's weird is for people with PWS, a lot of times they're willing to take a dice roll or a spinner roll or a timer versus somebody saying that. So if you do things like that, and most people aren't getting out, so you should always say take a different route to school or church or whatever else. But this idea that you can come up with different ways to get there. So build some level of uncertainty into the schedule. There should be a block of free time. You decide, and let your kid help you do that. So again, build in chance, risk, change into the schedule, and you may find that they get better over this period of time with knowing that it's not the end of the world. It's okay to feel anxious and worried about what's going to happen next, but if it turns out okay, they're like, oh, well, that was very uncomfortable, I didn't like that, but they start to realize they can stand it. And that is true of anybody who has high anxiety. Is you have to kind of like gently push them towards that and realize that it's going to be uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. And if they cry or they have a tantrum, you may find that the next time they realize even that, if they still go through with it and do it, that they are going to be able to conquer that uncertainty part way better.
All right, I'm going to go to our hand raises here for a minute, and then we'll come back to our typed in questions. Irina, I'm going to take you off mute so that you can ask your question. Irina, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead and ask
I'm
your
here.
question.
Hello. My question is, when the child raise voice, like very loud, like you think it's better just give this, just not he really raise his voice. What shall I do?
I do the old, I can't hear you because I just hear your anger. It's really hard for me to hear what you're saying, the words, when you're so angry. And again, I really would say try not to respond. So, if they're like, usually they don't get to that without a kind of a workup. So before they get to the voice, are they getting agitated? Are they getting frustrated? Do they need a break? Read the kind of body cues so that they don't have to raise their voice. And my thought is if they raise your voice and you give in, it is only going to they're going to go, that is the button I must push to get what I want. So be really careful that, and I kind of go, can you talk in a quiet voice so I can hear you just like my voice? And they're like, and they may not like it, but I think it's really important to kind of get them. And again, to realize when they do that, they're frustrated and they're angry. There's been a number of steps to get them there. It is not the one thing that they're upset about. It is the many things that they've compromised, given in on, or been frustrated about before. So I think it's reading those cues before they raise their voice, or before aggression happens, they throw something or take a swing or whatever else. It's looking at those cues before it happens and trying to diffuse it, redirect it, address it before it gets to that point.
So Elizabeth, I think that's a great lead in to another question, was simply suggestions for diffusing arguments. You know, sometimes our kids engage and they want to argue, and they're always right.
Always, even when they're not. Yeah, no, that's a hard one. I think some of it is like I said, to read the cues before they get there. So again, watch what they're doing, build in breaks, start to see when they're starting to get frustrated. You can kind of see if they're getting antsy or whatever else. And then the other thing is don't engage. It's like people find that it's like they get mad, and I get it, you're irritated. If you cannot control your emotions, they absolutely cannot control yours. So you just want to have that, kind of like way of speaking, that way of being that is calm, that is unflappable. And I get that it's hard right now because, again, everyone's in close corners. It's funny, that actually leads to the next slide that I have that I think is really pretty perfect, is find a way to be a yes man, right? So, right now flight attendants would all be wearing masks and no one would be flying. But if they were, this idea is no matter what your kid says, be it I'm ready for snack or whatever else, it's like, find a way to say yes. The word I almost never say with people with PWS is no. I find a way to say yes. If they say, I'm ready for a snack, and I'm like, God, me too, but it's only 8:30 and I know we only eat snack at 10. So, I guess we're going to have to find something else to do to kind of, do it, and to find something fun to do until snack time. I'm not saying no, I'm not saying whatever, I'm finding a way to say yes. So find a way to say yes. And it's hard for people, if you can find a way to say yes, to take some of the blame, to take some of the accountability part, you will find that if there's nothing to argue about, they will stop arguing with you. I've had kids who've been very upset, and I'll go, gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know if I said that inadvertently or by mistake. I must be losing my mind. I am so sorry. Can you forgive me? And they're like, what is she saying? Yeah, well, great. So I've obviously made a mistake. So this idea of we find a way to say yes, and we find a way for people to basically, the parent to be the one who kind of manages it, even if it's by copying that you did it, it's your fault or whatever else. When you do that, your kid has nothing to argue about because you just said that they're right. And they're like, wait, I don't even know what to do with that. Same thing with a yes man's not a bad thing, but a maybe man is the worst. So don't be the person that says maybe, or we'll talk about it later, or we'll see. Kids with PWS cannot handle that. Either say yes and let it be done, or no and let it be done, but do not give them a maybe or we'll talk about it, because all that's going to do is lead to a lot of arguments. And I think the idea of the personal characteristics that fit so well with PWS, being easygoing and patient, being flexible and creative, you may be surprised at your reserves of coming up with creative and flexible ways to solve problems in this situation than you ever thought. Also, being emotionally secure. I tell people all the time, it's not about you. Don't hold a grudge, let it go. If you have a sucky day, just let it be a sucky day, but start over the next day. Be a problem solver. I'm not here to, whatever, but can I solve this problem right now? Being calm and confident, and again, constantly rewarding behavior that is what you want to see, not just what you don't want to see. And again, people often are wired that way. They're always waiting for their kid to mess up to kind of notice it. But if they're doing anything right, notice that. And I will find that sometimes these things will head off arguments before they start.
Mm-hmm. So, referring back to your last slide about don't be the maybe man.
Yeah.
That really leads into this next question, which is, how do we prepare our children for this next wave of changes? We had appointments, we had school, we had plans, and right now a lot of these are being canceled, but we don't want to tell our kids ahead of time. So
Right.
How do we set them up so that they're not disappointed with when we ourselves don't know what to?
I think that's really hard. I'm kind of deciding, and again, I think everybody has to kind of figure out what works for them, but kind of saying that, you give it yourself a 2-week window, so you can only answer questions in the new 2 weeks that, are kind of coming up, and those things are canceled. So for everything about that, I'll just say that, as soon as we hear about June's schedule or May or whatever else, I will let you know, but nobody's making any decisions. Make it somebody else. So make it the doctor hasn't made the decision. The school hasn't made the decision. So again, kind of make, I hate to say it, the bad guy, but in this case, they don't know. I mean, it is stressful. I think we have to ourselves acknowledge that it's very stressful not to know what's going to happen. I'm a huge planner. I know a lot of you guys have to be huge planners because of your kid with PWS, but this idea, it is hard. I think this idea of living in the moment, focusing on the kind of here and now is really important because we don't know. So I think saying yes about today, and I was telling Susan before this started, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? One day at a time. You focus on today, and I think with your kid and whatever, I think you just have to say, we don't know about tomorrow, so we're just going to focus on today. They're not going to like it. They're not going to be happy with that answer. But again, we're only trying to get through today, right? We're not worried about the kind of future. So I think we have to really redirect their attention to what's happening right now, today, and not later in the week, next month, whatever else. And so I'll just look at them and just say, I have no way of knowing until the school makes a decision and they tell us, we're not going to know. They're going to hate it. Just be prepared. But I think it's important for us to realize that it affects us too, right? Having your kid there all the time and not knowing when the end is in sight is really scary. Acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way, having school canceled until June was a relief for Jaden and myself because now we have something that's clear.
Right.
And, we can say, well, we're going to go back in August. It made that part of our life a little bit easier. Virtual learning, maybe not so much, but that was an answer. That was a big question for him. Another series of questions here. Again, folks, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll take you off mute so that you can ask your questions directly, or I'll just keep going through the list of questions. But the next round is really about motivation. So motivating our kids to go through the self-care process in the mornings, motivating our kids to get on the family schedule, participate with the family. Our kids oftentimes, they want to be self-protecting. So their response to pretty much anything is no, not right now. How do we get them to be more willing to get on board?
I mean, again, I think, is it friendly competition? Is there a way that you can kind of use like natural kind of, human characteristics to do that? And again, I think, so I guess it depends, like, so family schedules, what are we talking about? Like, what are you wanting them to do? I get the self-care because again, brushing their teeth, washing their face, taking a shower, like, if it's making their bed, whatever it is, I think those things matter. But what other things are we trying to get them to participate? Is there something in it for them? Because if there is, that's what you sell them on. You're a salesman, right? Here's what's in it for you. Here's what you get to do. If there's nothing in it for them, it's going to be hard to convince them. So I think you have to be real about what do they enjoy about that. And if they hate it, acknowledge they hate it. And maybe they get to do something fun after that, or maybe they get to pick the next activity. But I think it's important to realize that if we're asking them to do something that's not kind of intrinsically rewarding, then we got to come up with something at the tail end of that so that it feels like, okay, I get to, it's just like, if I make my husband go to a family dinner with my family, what's in it for him, right? So this idea is you have to have something that is good for somebody when it's not intrinsically rewarding just in its own right. So I think it's thinking about those things and asking the kid, do you want to do this? And again, I wouldn't say, do you want to do this, but what do you like about this? What is hard for you? That kind of stuff. And if you know it, you don't need to ask them, but I think it's kind of coming up with those things and figuring out what works, how to kind of get something on the tail end to get them through a thing.
Yeah, we've recently had some success the last couple of days by, we always have screen time at certain set times in the day. They don't get to have it all day. So I've been telling them, well, if everyone will come out and go for a walk with us, then when we get back, it'll be a little bit early, but you can start screen time early. And it ends up being
that's great.
Extra or 10 minutes extra, not really a whole lot, but it's just enough of a motivator to get my son out and participating in the walk. So
I think that's a great idea, Susan. And that idea that you're selling him, right? Well, I know you, if we get back early, this is what you get to do. One thing I will say right now, and if you can do it, is kids who have pets, like kids especially who have dogs that need to be walked. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where everyone seems to have a dog. coming up with a schedule where your dog, to keep their good health and make sure, you know, that they're healthy and whatever else, you can make your kid in charge of that dog and walking that dog. And if you give them their phone or pedometer or something that kind of tracks that, so you make sure that Fluffy has enough outside time and fresh air and exercise. Kids like to be in charge of some pet. They like to be in charge of everything, right? So you can make that part of it. And we know that kids who have pets, who walk their pets, weigh less and have less food seeking than kids with PWS who don't. Like, what are the chances? They love pets. And if you can find a way to make that the motivator, even if it's the dog needs to be walked 4 times a day now, right? Because, you know, we've got this virus going on. We'll make sure our dog is healthy. Whatever it takes, you may find that that may be another way, especially when it comes to exercise, to motivate them to be a part of it. So it doesn't become exercise. Fluffy needs to be walked. The dog needs to go out for a walk.
Right. All right, I'm gonna go to taking some of our audience members off of mute. So Kayla, I'm gonna try unmuting you. Kayla, are you there? Kayla may not be there. Okay, we're gonna move to the next question then. Andrea, I'm gonna try taking you off mute. Andrea, you're off mute if you're there. Nope. Okay, well, we've got one more. I'm going to put down your hands, but if you figure out your audio and you want to raise your hand again, then we can go ahead and give it a second shot. Irina, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can ask a question. Irina, you're ready?
Yes, I'm ready. My question is that the child lives with the like kind of monsters. If he doesn't want to listen, I said, oh, green monster will come to get you. And he believes that, and then he listens. My question is, how often, I'm afraid that in the future, he really will live in the imagined, like, you know, not in the real life. And how can I do it? Like, I sometimes, I said, policemen will come. Don't do that. Don't touch someone's cars. The policeman will give you a ticket or something like that. So my question, how pretended children in the classroom, especially right now, we don't have, you know, school, and I'm like afraid like in the future he will live with this, you know. Is it, am I right or not, how to work with it?
Well, so how old is your son, Irina?
6.
Okay, well, I mean, I think at this point, I mean, it's working. So, you know, if it works, you can use it. And at some point, it's definitely not going to work. He's going to look at you and go, no monsters, you know, whatever. Just know that at some point, he's going to call your bluff. That's when you know you have to come up with another strategy. I think the idea that using this and somehow it becomes so ingrained that he starts to believe it, that's not kind of generally how it works. But I will say that you have to be kind of careful about using things that really are effective, but you kind of know there's like a sense of risk with it. So at 6, you can do that, but I would try to use other things that are more like real, right? So when I tell people, if they don't buckle in their seatbelt, I can't drive the car, and, you know, the policeman could give me a ticket, I could be fined. I think that's a real thing that could happen, and that's okay to use. So kind of think about what would be a real consequence and what would be one that you're making up, because at some point he's going to call you on your bluff and he's going to go, no monsters. And then all of a sudden you're going to go, oh no, I got to come up with a new thing to do. So just try to think of things that are more real and start to sprinkle them throughout, so that when he becomes older and he's less, you know, gullible, you got other options.
Okay, thank you so much.
All righty, Kayla, we're going to give you another try. Let's see if what happens when we unmute you. Are you there? Nope. Okay, Kayla, we can try one more time. I'll go ahead and mute you again, and you can raise your hand again if you think you can figure out the audio. Laura, we're gonna unmute you. Laura, are you there? Also having an issue.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Laura, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Hi. Just a really quick question, back to like the repetitive behaviors. So when my son's 8, and when he wakes up, he goes into this sort of vocalizing mode. And I was listening to what you were saying before about how if it's not hurting anyone or sort of keep them busy, but it's really not hurting anyone, except it's so loud. It wakes everybody up in the middle of the night. So it's this very, very loud vocalizing. And he's having a ball. He's not hurting anybody. It's the middle of the night. He does it for about an hour till he falls back asleep again. So I guess maybe just listening to you, is it just trying to replace it with another behavior? But how do we do that in the middle of the night? You know?
Right. So I would say that, can you, find a way for it? And again, if he's only 8, it's a little harder about the volume control because they're like, I'm not that loud. And I was like, oh my God, people in another county can hear you here. But I think
wakes up the whole house.
Right. So coming up with a way where, and I would, if he's loud enough that you can hear him, I would walk in his room and go, I can hear you. You're waking everyone up. So now there's either early bedtime. You come up with, I hate to say it, kind of a consequence, but you have to. And basically say, as long as I don't hear you, you can stay up. But if I hear you, and I did this when I used to be an art teacher, I let them listen to music. And if I couldn't hear the music over the sound of them, whatever, I would be like, okay, man, the radio goes off. And it would be like, come up with something that works so that the volume is at a level that you can't hear. And again, he probably doesn't think it's that loud, but I would just say, I can hear you. So just find a way, intercom. If you don't want to go in there, is there a way that you can do it? And just say it. There needs to be a consequence if he doesn't follow along. So give him a warning. And then after the warning, there needs to be something. Lights go off. I don't know, whatever you decide works. He misses screen time. He misses something he enjoys doing. So he realizes there's a legitimate consequence. My thought is if he's talking to somebody, it's like there's nobody there. There's no reason for him to be that loud. You just have to kind of get him to be aware of it. And then there needs to be a consequence when he hits that threshold. You warn him, and then there's some kind of consequence, whatever that might be. And my thought is that you're not going to replace that behavior because the self-talk is such an ingrained behavior, but the volume you can work on. And that's what I would just focus only on the volume. That's the only thing that matters.
All right, Natalie, I'm going to try unmuting you if you're ready. Are you there?
Yes. Hi,
Great.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thanks for taking my question. I have actually 2 questions I'd like to sneak in. One is about this brutal combination of perseverating and yelling. So I have a 5-year-old son, and we, for better or for worse, try to motivate him to go for walks by saying, oh, we're going to take a snack in our fancy Elmo container, and we're going to go to the park and walk. And once he gets that in his head, he perseverates. I want to go to the park. Starts yelling that over and over. And we'll say, yes, we're going to the park. And he'll just keep yelling it, even when we're on the street, yelling, I want to go to the park. And we could be walking to the park, and it persists. Any suggestions?
Well, so that's kind of how he's processing. He's very excited, right? So he's like, and I'm going to keep saying it, whatever else. I would validate it before you go out, like before you leave the house and go, he'll say it. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. When we get out, it is important. We're not going to keep saying it, and come up with something else that he can do. I don't know what that might be. Is it kicking rocks? Is it something that you can find that can, and whatever, and try not to like engage him. And I would just say, I've already told you. And again, maybe what it means is next time, if you keep yelling, I'm going to the park or whatever else, we can't go to the park tomorrow. You're scaring people. And again, he's 5, he's not going to really get that. But this idea that you want to come up with what you expect, a way to validate it. Yes, I know, I'm very excited, but we're not going to keep saying it. We've already said it. Or maybe you have a little cheer party before you go out of the door. Yeah, whatever. And then you close the door and you're not going to keep saying it. And if he does, walk him back in and go, we can't go because you keep yelling, we're going to the park. They need to understand that their actions have consequences. And again, at 5, he's able to understand that. You don't have to be overly punitive, but it's important for him to get it, because otherwise it's only going to get more, and you're never going to be able to redirect him because there's no reason to, right?
Right. So we have about 5 minutes left in our hour. I'm going to try to, again, go through as many of these questions as we can, but I wanted everyone to just have a heads up that we are starting to reach the end of our webinar. Alexander, you've had your hand up for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question. Alexander, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. So our daughter is 5, and one thing she generally likes to do is what they call stimming. So she'll sort of just be mesmerized and put her hands up and be really happy. And she'll look at things like, she'll, for example, look at a car outside the window that was being towed, and she'll just be there stimming. And she's doing a lot of that during these days. And she seems very happy doing it. And the question is just whether that's something we should try to limit during this time, or since she's happy doing it, should we just let it go?
So it's kind of a combination. So if it takes up a lot of time that you're not doing other things, yeah, I think you need to kind of redirect her or whatever else, and she's not going to like it. It's not uncommon for kids to stim, and it's not uncommon for them to be, like you said, mesmerized by things and whatever else. I would just, let her do it for a couple minutes, 5 minutes. You guys decide, and even say when she starts, oh, we're gonna put the timer on, we're gonna, and then we get back to this. It should be something fun. So don't say we're gonna do math or whatever else, but come up with something that you can transition her from. And again, compartmentalize it. Make it so that it's something, you're not gonna make such a big deal of it, because it's something they really do need to sometimes do to self-soothe, but then you move her along. So just make it a time limit or a amount limit that you can live with, and redirect her.
So I love this next question that's been submitted. So we have an adult who has PWS on the call joining us today, and he would like to know what strategies that he could use himself to stop asking so many repetitive questions.
I like to do like tick marks, or like figure out how many times I've asked it over and over. So if you can come up with a way to count it on your fingers or in your head or whatever else, and to kind of realize that if you've asked it 3 times and you've gotten the answer 3 times, you got to give it up. Sometimes it's because you don't like the answer, right? It's like, I don't like this answer. This is not what I want. But to know that that's the only way to kind of stop it. I'm kind of impressed that you're willing to even think about it being under your control and something you want to take charge of. So the fact that you're even asking that, the first step to change is to acknowledge that it's a problem, is just to kind of say that, hey, I want to make this better, and tell your parents that. Ask them to help you make it better, because you're going to need some help in that regard. But just come up with a way that you can count it and a limit that you're willing to live with, and know that you may feel uncomfortable and you may not like it for a little bit, but once it kind of passes, you're like, okay, I can live with that. It's not the worst thing ever. And then try not to go back to it. Distracting yourself with other activities is also a great way to get yourself to stop doing it. Find something else you like to do. That's a great question, though.
Yeah, I loved that one. So we do have time for just this one final question. So this will be the last question for today's webinar. How would you suggest, or how have others done this, explained COVID-19 to your loved ones? So how do we frame it to them so they can understand what it is that we're all going through?
I think to be as concrete as you can. So to talk about the fact that it's a virus and it's passed from one person to another by things we touch, breathing, a lot of things, right? And we don't know exactly, this is a new one. We haven't had this illness before, and that we have to keep ourselves safe and other people safe and healthy by keeping distance, the things that we do, wash our hands, all those things, not touching our face, which I can never stop doing. Those things are things we need to be doing. And just kind of realizing, and again, it's unprecedented. No one's ever had to deal with anything like this. So I think it's important to kind of get that it's hard, but if you come up with the most concrete way to address the knowledge we have, things we can do to make it better or to help, and then to realize that for the foreseeable future, this is kind of how things are going to be. That's all I would say. I wouldn't let them do like a lot of watching of things, listening to things. It's scary for me. It's got to be scary for them. They sometimes know just enough to be freaked out. So not too much information, concrete, helpful information, how you can control it, what you can do, how you can play your part. That's how I would focus it. And I would really make it a 2-minute conversation. You may need to have it multiple times, but that's all I would say. Don't make it too scary, because it is scary.
Right. So Elizabeth, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out. We had a full house. We had 200 people registered. We had to close up at 100 seats. So there was a lot of people who weren't able to participate. We've recorded this. Did I? Yes, we did record this. I just had to double check. We're going to make it available. And next Friday, we will have another one of these sessions. So if you have questions that weren't answered today, or if you know someone out in the community who could really benefit from being a part of one of these webinars, we will be back. Well, when I say we, I mean Elizabeth is going to be here to answer all of you, as many questions as we can. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane if you can, and we'll be back here again next week. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.